Welcome to this first lecture of soil science and technology, and in this lecture we will cover basically the basic overview of soils. And so let us see what we are going to cover in this lecture. First of all, we will cover what is soil, that means what is the definition of soil. Then we will talk about different branches of soil science, what are the different branches of soils, and then we will talk about what are the important functions of soil, why we are studying the soil science and what is the need of studying the soil science. And finally, we will be talking about the composition of soil. That means the soil is composed of what are the different components of soil, and we will have a brief overview of each of them. So, let us start. So, by definition, soil is the unconsolidated cover of the earth made up of mineral and organic components, water and air, and capable of supporting plant growth. So, again it is an unconsolidated cover over the earth, and it is made of both mineral and organic components, water and air molecules, and capable of supporting plant growth. So, soil is a heterogeneous mixture of different components. It is unconsolidated and it has to attain certain features to be termed as a soil, and we will discuss that later on. So, let us see what are the different branches of soil science. So, these are different branches of soil science. I have listed couple of them, but the new branches are evolving each and every day. So, the major important branches are pedology, then soil chemistry, then soil physics, then soil biology and biochemistry, then soil fertility, soil mineralogy, and soils and environmental quality. So, soil pedology basically deals with the origin of soil and its classification and its several features. The soil chemistry basically deals with several chemical properties of the soil. Soil physics basically deals with physical properties of the soil. Soil biology and biochemistry deals with different microorganisms and different organic colloids and organic molecules which are present into the soil. Soil fertility basically deals with the fertility status of the soil, how soil is an important entity for sustaining the plant and how it supplies different nutrients to the plant. So, that is basically covered in soil fertility. Soil mineralogy basically deals with the different minerals and their structures and their characteristics. And there is another major branch, that is soil and environmental quality, which basically deals with soil pollution and their remediation. Now, I have kept couple of blanks because each and every day there are new branches of soil science are evolving. For example, there is a new branch of soil science called DSM, or it is basically digital soil mapping, and this branch of soil has been very popular for last couple of decades, and we will have a thorough discussion on what is DSM and what are their aspects. So, let us see what actually is pedology. So, pedology is basically the study of soils as a naturally occurring phenomena, and this term pedology is basically derived from the Greek word pedon, that means soil or earth. And pedology basically talks about factors and processes of soil formation, and then soil features and their classification. Just like any other biological organisms, soil also can be classified into different categories. So, the soil pedology deals with that, and also distribution of different types of soil. So, this is in a nutshell soil pedology. And what are the important functions of soil? Well, there are 5 major functions of soil. I have listed them here. So, the first one, it is a medium for plant growth. This is the most important for our earth as well as for sustaining our life. Secondly, it is a biochemical or nutrient reactor which absorbs, releases, that is dissolved, and transfer of inorganic and biochemical compounds such as essential plant nutrients, pesticides, minerals, heavy metals, and numerous other compounds. So, that is why sometimes we use soil as a filter for depositing different types of harmful products or wastes. Soil also acts as a hydrologic buffer which stores and regulate the flow or in other words regulates the drainage of water in the landscapes, and it basically gives the foundation of our physical support for the structures, including everything from plants to skyscrapers. So from engineering perspective to agricultural perspective, soil is giving us support for everything. So, these are basically the functions, major functions of soil. So, let us see how, soil is made up of what components. So, if you consider the total volume of a soil or biologically healthy soil as 100%, you will see that the half of its volume is basically occupied by solid phase and the rest half is occupied by pore space. Now, this pore space is shared by air and water. So, in a biologically healthy soil, there is approximately 25% of air and 25% of water residing in this pore space. And the solid phase is basically composed of mineral matter as well as organic fractions. So, mineral matter basically composed of 45%, whereas organic matter content is only 5%. But remember, although there is a very few, the organic matter content is only 5%, it is one of the major important fraction of soil that governs soil physical, chemical and biological activities. We will talk about that in details later on. So, if you see the soil pores based on their effective diameter range in nanometer, we have classified them into 2 major simplified classes like macropores you can see and micropores. And macropores have effective diameter of 0.8 to 5 millimeter, whereas micropores diameter basically range from less than 0.001 millimeter to 0.08 millimeter. And depending upon their size variation, micropores are also divided into 4 subcategories like mesopores, micropores, ultramicropores and cryptospores. So, this is basically the overview of composition of a soil. So, let us see soil is, as it is evident from our previous slide that soil is composed of both mineral and organic matter as well as air and water. So, it can be easily concluded that soil is an interface between the lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and biosphere. And the intersection or soil is also known as pedosphere. So, again the soil is composed of 4 different spheres. So, it is basically intersection of 4 different spheres: atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere and biosphere. In the lithosphere, basically the mineral matter, generally mineral matter comes into the lithosphere, organic matter comes into the biosphere, atmosphere is basically soil layer and hydrosphere generally represent soil water. Okay. So, let us consider the soil mineral matter. Now, soil mineral matter fractions are basically divided into several separates or categories. Now, from the perspective of soil science, we generally term a soil which has particle size diameter of less than 2 millimeter. Anything greater particle size 2 millimeter, we generally do not term them as soil. For example, if you can see the size distribution here, we can see gravels, sand, silt and clay based on their particle size diameter. However, the gravel is not technically comes under soil definition because it has greater than 2 millimeter particle diameter, and the fraction which comes below 2 millimeter diameter particle size is again differentiated into three major categories. One is sand, another is silt, another is clay. So, sand is having, according to the this scale is basically given by United States Department of Agriculture or USDA. So, according to them, the sand has diameter from 0.05 millimeter to 2 millimeter, whereas silt comes under 0.05 to 0.002 millimeter and clay has their size less than 0.002 millimeter. So, it is evident that clay is the most finer fraction among all the mineral fractions of soil. And there are several categories, based on this sand, silt and clay, their properties also varies widely. For example, I have given here, if you consider gravel which is not technically soil, if you feel it with your thumb and finger, you will feel it is coarse in nature obviously. Sand, if you feel it, your thumb and finger, you will see it is gritty in nature. Silt is, you will feel it floury in nature. However, clay is basically sticky when it is wet. And in the right picture, you will see that it is the, I have shown you that the relative sizes of sand, silt and clay, as you can see, fine, clay fractions are very, very fine and they have less than 0.002 millimeter, and we need high magnification, almost 1000 magnification you can see here. However, sand is the coarsest fraction, and in between the sand and clay the silt fraction is present, which has particle size diameter ranging from 0.002 to 0.05. Okay. So, based on these sand, silt and clay fraction, we also call them soil separates. Now, these soil separates has their variation in soil properties, a variation in their properties. For example, as you can see, the first property is a range in the range of particle diameter in millimeter. Obviously, we have talked about it. However, if you consider the means of observation, how can you see these particles? Obviously, sand can be seen in naked eyes, whereas silt can be seen with a microscope, and clay fraction is so fine that it can only be seen with the help of electron microscope. Now, in case of sand and silt fraction, you will see dominance of primary minerals and secondary minerals, some amount of secondary minerals in silt. However, the clay is basically dominant, clay will have dominance of secondary minerals. Now, we will discuss in details what are the primary minerals and what are the secondary minerals. Just to give you an idea, primary minerals are the original minerals which are present in the rock from where the soil basically develops, and secondary clay minerals is a, it is a altered form of primary mineral due to different types of physical, chemical and biochemical effects. And if you consider attraction of particle for each other, obviously the sand does not show any attraction of particles, whereas silt shows medium attraction between each other. However, in case of clay you will see high attraction, and these develops due to different types of physical and chemical properties. Now, ability to hold chemicals and nutrients in plant available form, you will see that sand is having very low amount of water, chemical and nutrient holding capacity, whereas clay has a very high amount of water and nutrient holding capacity in plant available form, whereas silt is having medium or low amount of water holding capacity. Now, sand is also having loose and gritty consistency, whereas clay is having very sticky and malleable consistency, and silt is having in between, that is smooth consistency. And consistency when dry will change to very loose and gritty for sand, whereas in case of clay it will become hard clods, and in case of silt it will become powdery, and sometime it will form some clods. So, let us talk about the soil organic matter and its composition. Now, soil organic matter, although it is present in only 5% volumetric basis, it is a very important fraction of soil. And if you consider again the total volumetric composition of soil organic matter, you will see that the living organism the living organism which are present in the soil consists less than 5% of the total soil organic matter. Fresh residues, that means fresh leaf fall and fresh dead bodies of animals and all these things, they constitute about less than 10%, whereas decomposing organic matter, which is called the active fraction of soil, consists about 33 to 50%. As you can see in the right picture, we are having a active fraction of soil which we can generally see at the top of any soil, especially when we have any forest like areas, you will have this type of surface of the soil which is basically decomposing organic matter or organic fraction. And the 33 to 50% is basically called humus, and humus is a stabilized organic matter. That means it is a kind of altered product from the original organic fractions, and it is the most important fraction among soil organic matter that controls the soil physical, chemical and biological properties, and we will discuss in details about the composition and how humus forms in the later classes. So, basically the composition of soil basically tells us whether a soil is fertile or not, or in other words soil is good or bad. For example, in the left picture you can see the leftmost soil is having high amount of organic matter. As you can see, the earthworms can be seen, and the rightmost soil is basically low amount of organic matter. So, obviously, the physical, chemical and biological properties of the soil will be better in that soil which are having high amount of organic matter, and these soil will be helpful for better growth of the plant as compared to the other soil. And as I have told you that organic matter is also having high amount of water holding capacity, that a soil which has high amount of organic matter also will show high amount of water holding capacity. For example, in the rightmost picture, as you can see, the first this container contains, and this container contains two different soil with varying amount of organic matter. So, this container contain high organic matter and this container contain low organic matter soil, and as you can see, due to the change in content of organic matter or soil organic matter, the water holding capacity changes. That means, the water has penetrated less in case of this soil as compared to this soil. So, that means, the first soil with high amount of organic matter showing higher water holding capacity, and this is very good for better growth of the plant, because plant will have more water in this type of soils. Okay. So, remember one thing, both clay and this organic matter, these two fractions are the most chemically reactive fraction in the soil, and clay particles which are smaller than 0. Which are smaller than 0.001 millimeter, and most of these organic particles are basically colloidal in nature, because they shows colloidal properties. These are two very important fractions in the soil which are chemically reactive because of different charge development. And what are these different types of charges? We will discuss in the later classes. Now, colloidal system, by definition you know that colloidal system are two-phase system in which very small particles of one substance are dispersed in a medium of a different substance. So, one is dispersion phase and is a dispersion medium. And some examples are milk and blood, which are examples of colloidal system in which very small particles are dispersed in a liquid medium. So, in case of soil, these clay and organic matter are the two important fraction which show colloidal properties. Now, let us talk about the important minerals, or the mineral nutrients of the plants. As you know that one of the major function of the soil is to sustain the plant over the earth's surface. So, soil is basically, soil requires these nutrients to be taken from the soil, and these nutrients which are essential for the growth of the plant are called essential nutrients. Now, there are several elements present in the earth's surface, as you know, but only 16 to 17 elements we call them as essential elements or mineral nutrients of the plants. Now, how would you decide that which mineral is essential or not? So, this criteria of essentiality of mineral nutrient was given by these two scientists called Arnold and Stout in 1939, and these three criteria basically governs whether an element is essential for plant or not. For example, the first criteria is the given plant must be unable to complete its life cycle in the absence of mineral element, or that particular mineral element. So, it cannot complete its life cycle without that particular mineral element. The second criteria is the function of the element must not be replaceable by another mineral nutrient. And third one is that element must be directly involved in plant metabolism, for example, as a cofactor in the enzyme. So, when an element conforms all these criteria, then we call that element as an essential nutrient for plant. So, if you see the essential nutrient of the plant, we broadly classified them. For example, the carbon, hydrogen, as you can see in this table, we broadly classified them into macronutrients and micronutrients. So, macronutrients is basically requires in relatively higher amount, that is greater than 0.1% of the dry plant tissue, whereas micronutrients used in relatively small amount, that is less than 0.1% of the dry plant tissue. But irrespective of their quantity required, they are essential. That means, even if a micronutrient is absent into the soil, plant cannot complete its life cycle. So, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, we call them structural elements, and they the plants basically get this carbon, hydrogen, oxygen from air and water. However, the other 17 elements are divided into these macronutrients and micronutrients. Now, among macronutrients, obviously, as you can see, the nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur is there, and in calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, and potassium is there. And in case of micronutrients, cobalt, iron, manganese, nickel, zinc. In case of anions, boron, molybdenum, these are important, and we will discuss in details in the later classes. So, soil water. Now, soil water or soil moisture regime is a very important or major determinant of productivity of the terrestrial ecosystem, and soil water is different from a glass of water because it behaves differently into the soil, and we will talk in details about the soil water, what are their characteristics and what are the different types of attractive forces which are present into the soil for holding these soil water. We will discuss in details in the later classes. And another important term is soil solution. Now, soil solution is another name of soil water because it contains a significant quantities of soluble organic and inorganic substances, including the plant nutrients, and this clay and humus releases basically the nutrient element to the soil solution from which the plants uptake those nutrients. Now, the soil solution tend to resist any change in its composition even when compounds are added or removed from the soil, and this ability of soil solution is termed as the soil buffering capacity, and is very important, and we will discuss this term later on in details. Now, another important term is soil acidity and alkalinity. You know that it is measured through pH, and pH is basically the negative logarithm of hydrogen ion concentration. So, a soil which is having pH of 7 is basically neutral, whereas a soil having the pH greater than 7 is called termed alkaline, and when it is pH goes below 7, we call it acidic soil. And this chart basically shows the ranges of acidic soil, neutral soil and alkaline soil. And remember one thing, for growth of the plants, for uptaking of the nutrients, the most optimum range of pH is 6.5 to 7.5. So, all the nutrients are available in optimum quantity or rate in this pH range. Soil aeration is a ventilation of soil allowing gases to be exchanged with the atmosphere, and gas is basically exchanged by two major forces. One is called mass flow, another is diffusion. The mass flow is air force by wind or pressure, whereas diffusion when the when gas moves from along the concentration gradient, that means from high concentration to low concentration. Now, composition of soil air, it obviously differs from the soil air from the atmospheric air. So, the composition of soil air varies greatly from one place to another place, and soil air generally have a higher moisture content. Sometimes it reaches the humidity of 100% unless soil is very dry. And as you can see from this table, soil air, in case of a comparison of soil air and nitrogen, and soil air contains 79.2% nitrogen, almost similar in atmosphere, whereas oxygen is also same. However, carbon dioxide you can see almost 10 times increase in case of soil air than that of atmosphere, because of high amount of respiration which is going on by different microorganisms present into the soil. So, that is why soil air is having high amount of carbon dioxide than that of atmospheric air. So, the reference is basically the Nature and Properties of the Soil by Niall C. Brady and Ray Irwin. So, you can follow this book for gaining a better understanding of these things. So, hopefully, we will meet in the, you have learned something new. Thank you.